I just arrived back from Toronto. Imagine waking up in Toronto this morning, and then today right now I'm in Los Angeles, back home. I wasn't going to do anything, but still, since I'm short of a few programs, I have to catch up. So here it is. A very favorite verse in the Bible of mine. There's so many favorites, hard to choose, but one particularly that has served me well over the decades, one that I refer to all the time, each time I have to make a decision on anything, on something big or small, about anything. I remember this verse. It comes from Proverbs 4, verse 23, and it says, "Guard your heart, for out of it comes all the issues of life." We've been programmed from infancy to think with our heart, which involves our emotions. We see with our eyes. Our minds tells us it is an enticing object. Our hearts long for it. And we do whatever it takes to obtain it. But the Bible, and especially here in Proverbs 4:23, said to guard our hearts. Not all that we desire is good for us. In fact, most are not beneficial. Proverbs' advice is to make informed decisions. Use scripture to guide us in making such decisions. We have a dim view of scripture, especially when we were younger. All this "thou shalt not" is curbing our fun. Little do we realize that these "thou shalt not" protects us from the untoward consequences of our emotional decisions. The principle, you reap what you sow. The seed produces its own fruit. A foolish decision and action leads to disaster, heartache, and pain. We've already seen an example of Samson and Delilah in Judges 16. We do well to read the story again. The Old Testament locates the heart as the center of personal being. It is not merely the home of affection, but the seat of will, moral purpose. As this text says, the issues of life flow from it in various forms. Guard your heart, for out of it comes the issues of life. This guarding is imposed as necessary because our nature is not a republic, it's a monarchy. We rule, we do what we want. It's not like a republic where there is debate in our heads that guard our hearts. The unregenerate person wants whatever his heart desires. It's full of blind impulses and hungry desires which take no heed of any law but their own satisfaction. If the reins are thrown on the necks of these untamed horses, they drag the man to destruction. They are only safe when they are curbed and bitted and held well in. I don't have cable television, but my brother has. Since I was in his home where my mother is, I've been able to watch some terrible cable television. One particular program called 90 Day Fiancé, I don't know if anybody have seen it. It's a disaster. I guess the more disastrous one's life is, they call it reality TV. The more disastrous it is, the more excitement it generates, the more sensation it generates. For some reason, we want to see that other people are not having fun, that their lives is just as disastrous as ours. It's about, couples who dates, and then I don't know how that shows really, but anyway, so the whole bunch of them, girls and boys, who have found people overseas whom they wish to get married to, so they call themselves fiancé, and then the camera moves around with them. So there is this one particular thing couple is more terrible than the others. Well, all are disastrous. Let's put it this way. 19-year-old Avery, pretty young white girl from Ohio who converted to Islam and went on an Islamic dating site and found Omar, who lives in Lebanon, is a Syrian refugee. So now she wants to marry him and could be talked out of it. Her mother said, how? Why? So she went over to Lebanon to marry him. Marry him and his Syrian refugee. And now wants to bring him home. So the first thing she did was to consult a lawyer. And the lawyer said, Syrian, you know about the travel ban, right? You know that there are 7 Muslim countries who can't come to the United States, Syria being one of them. He said, yeah, can you get a waiver? The lawyer said, very unlikely a waiver in this case. So there she is, you know, all in a bind. It's like, you know, in other words, if I want to be crude, she's screwed. She can bring him to the United States. Of course, she can join him wherever he goes, but her folks are here. She doesn't want to leave the comforts of the United States and go to Lebanon. That's another story. But that's how it is. She, like all the other couples, was so willful. You know, the cameras are there. For some reason, we want to, we are bored. We don't like the lives we're living. So we think that we should get into things like this, and this would be fun, or at least, you know, the cameras on us. But nothing is further from the truth. It's like Samson being blinded, going round and round and round and not getting anywhere. That's what happens when you don't guard your heart. You don't think with your head and say, is this the right thing to do? Even if you're not a Christian, you know, you should think, you know, how is it going to work? But that's another story. I would be the last person to joke about another person's misfortune. But he or she, if she or her mother has done a little research, use the head instead of the heart, they will be spared all this heartache. This is so simple. Just knowledge of a very simple verse in the Bible would have preserved us for a prosperous life. This is one of the many verses that has preserved me over the past many decades. But the book of Proverbs is not called the book of wisdom for nothing. This verse and every verse and chapter in Proverbs is to preserve us. The counsel in Proverbs is not mere toothless moral commonplace, but is associated with fatherly advice to let thine heart keep my commandments and to trust in the Lord with all thine heart. The heart that is guarded by God is victorious and prosperous. And 1 Peter 1 verse 5 says, and through your faith, God is protecting you by his power until you receive the salvation which is ready to be revealed on the last day for all to see. The law commands, thou shalt not, but the Gospels give power to obey. We are to be guarded by God's power. How powerful is God? How able is he? He is the God who created the universe. He is the God who raised Jesus from the dead. He is the God of all. He is able. We are being guarded by God's power through faith. It is not our faith that is powerful. It is God's. But it is a faith through which this relationship with God began and is maintained. And I repeat, Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart, for out of it comes all the issues of life.